Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, whatever, or good evening, whatever time it might be. Uh, so, uh, my name is Dagmawi, and I figured it might be a good idea to do a little brief intro. And basically, you could call me Dougie. That's how most people know me these days. And so, yeah, um, I'm just going to give you a brief highlight about uh, my life's journey and how I got here and why I'm basically doing this channel. For a lack of a better word, consider this to be my somewhat personal channel. I call it BUNNA OS because of the fact that I've been using coffee to look at a lot of things that I've been interested in throughout my life. So for me, coffee is like a platform. Okay. So I use it for everything, pretty much. And because of that, and Bunna being, you know, the meaning of Bunna is coffee. So OS being the operating system. So I use it that way. And so as for me, so I was, you know, I'm from Addis, the capital city, Ethiopia. Born and raised here. And in the 1992, uh, I went to the US for education, high school, 11 and 12, 11 and 12th grade. And then I did my undergrad in 1998, finished that at Marlborough College in Vermont. Okay. And I studied, so I started out as applied math and physics major. Okay. That's how I started out. My primary interest was algorithm development. And at that time, my primary interest in this venture was basically using algorithm to predict what kind of uh, active ingredients will be suitable for a particular therapy or drug. So it's mostly for drug development. Okay, that was my initial interest. And one of the courses I was required to take at that time was organic chemistry. Okay, and with organic chemistry, I loved it. Uh, Most probably to this day remains the easiest course I ever taken, which is odd. But it helped me figure out also the how I think and what kind of person I am. And after loving biochem and getting tired of with numbers, I wanted to shift. So I changed my major to biochemistry, biochem, and immunology. For most of you from different parts of the world, uh, one of the things I want you to take with you is the education system in the US, the higher ed, at least when I was attending it, used to be quite flexible depending on the school you went to. So for a school like Marlborough that had 260 students at that time, a four-year college, uh, you'll find people measuring in theater and biology, neuroscience to even, so it's quite flexible, liberal arts college. Now, Marlborough College is actually now part of the Emerson College. they merged uh, just a few years back, and so yeah, and now there's a place called the Marlborough Institute within Emerson. So that's just a little bit of history. And after finishing my undergrad in 98 and 99, I did a master's in biotechnology. Okay. And here it's recombinant DNA, protein chemistry, that kind of stuff that I specialized in. And yeah, and then until 2004, April, to be exact, I worked as a protein chemist and research assistant doing DNA damage and repair work. This was more basic science, and this was more for biotech industry. This was in Boston, and this was in Detroit. This work was for the Karmanos Cancer Institute. So my stay here for almost 4 years, I was a co-author for 2 papers, okay? Peer-reviewed papers, and they helped me figure out basically DNA damage and repair and genomic stability. There is what we call checkpoint mechanism. So this is like a controlling system that really manages how DNA damages get repaired, what options are available, if termination is the best option, or if if the whole gene. It's a systems perspective, really. That's the big takeaway I want you to take. This is where I really started developing a systems perspective. So, and this is important later on. I'll talk about it. Systems thinking is essential here. Okay. And I loved it. But, I love interacting with people a lot more. So, lab was not going to be my final destination. That much I figured out. But I loved the work. So, what's so special about 2004? April, I moved back to Ethiopia. Okay. And initially, I came back to teach, lecture. I was assigned to Debub University, now Awasa. But two things I figured out through volunteering at Defense University and Addis Ababa University, teaching instrumentation and biochemistry. At Debub University, I did a semester of immunology. We leave the bureaucracy aside, but one of the things, at least, the education system in Ethiopia, it's hard to call it student centered. It's more admin or lecturer centered. Okay. So the teaching and learning culture was a bit strange for someone that comes from the US. And also, bureaucratically, didn't appeal to me very much. But the major reason for me not pursuing teaching in Ethiopia was so you see, I'm an Ethiopian. I hold an Ethiopian passport. Ethiopia does not allow dual citizenship. So my initial employment process was at that time handled by the Ministry of Education and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs because I was not in Ethiopia. But the moment I came here, the university administration insisted on advertising uh, the job opening, and they were just taking a very long time to do it, almost a year later. So they had three different. So to make a story short, they insisted on advertising it on newspaper three times. And in 2004, in Ethiopia, finding someone with a biochem and immunology specialization and with a clear cut understanding of what the biotech industry is like and the different tools and equipments that are used in the biotech industry in Ethiopia, you know, I, I don't even think there are a dozen of us at that time. Even now, there aren't enough biochemists in Ethiopia. So, uh, you know, so I figured maybe it was just time to move on. So I moved on. And between 2004, late October, starting at that time, up to January 2011, actually 2012, I was in the public health world. Okay. I needed to make a strategic shift to public health. I'm a data person. I love analysis, and writing is not a that big of a deal. So I figured, I shift to public health. Did a lot of behavioral related stuff, especially in the world of sexual and reproductive health rights and HIV/AIDS at that time, and really looking at systems, especially in integration and linkage, because the world was about vertical systems for these two. Uh, and so I did a lot of work in integration and linkage of these two, that kind of stuff. And the reason I break it down this way is for a particular reason. At this time, I was also doing a lot of consultancy. Very few employments, really. If I was ever employed, it was mostly part time. And only for 1 year, I served as a country director for a UK based NGO. That was it. And didn't like it. And, you know, NGO politics is worse than government politics, at least in Ethiopia. And yeah, and another key important thing is I became a leadership development coach. This was in 2006, November. And it's a UNDP program using their framework and systems thinking played a critical role. So that was what I loved about it. And so I did run a few leadership development programs, but mostly, especially after, yeah, mostly I use it for team building, organizational development work, and that kind of stuff. So, and the one thing I want you to pay attention is that I never really stopped my science. I never really stopped my public health. Uh, I never really stopped my leadership and yeah, basic science. So you might know me in one channel and may not know the other work I do in the others. And in 2012, before that, me and my wife had started a retail business, but in 2012 it became a manufacturing business focusing on coffee roasting. Okay, so that's when I became really familiar with, or in detail, went into coffee, and that was a start of a fascinating journey. In 2013, I did a course with the Ministry of Agriculture to become at the coffee liquoring unit, and that was a critical journey for me because it still is the best course I ever taken on Ethiopian coffees. And it's a 3 months course, and it's like half a day, Monday through Friday, for 3 months. And it's interesting. I recommend it to anyone who's interested in Ethiopian coffees. That is the course for you. I think it could be shorter, but nothing to complain at the end of the day. I find it a bit restrictive in a sense, It's not flexible. It's too costly for the Ethiopian settings, and it's asking too much. It could be broken down in two, three different phases so that you get a brief intro and then an intermediary level and advanced level based on interest. But because it is needed to obtain a certificate of competency to enter the coffee industry in Ethiopia, um, it's used more as a barrier to entry than anything else. So we leave it at that. And then in 2016, two things happened. Early on, I went to study a second master's in uh, coffee economics and science at the Ernesto Eli program, and I'm forever grateful for the scholarship that they given me to attend. Uh, it kind of changed the way I look at a lot of things. It's not necessarily the education per se, but really the environment they provided. Monday through Friday, 9 to 5, coffee. That's all for 6 months on campus. This was in Trieste and before COVID. Now they've adjusted it a little bit. But this was really critical for me. It gave me time and space to reflect. But another lesson that I took from that was most of the lecturers who came to give the courses, they're experts, highly specialized in their field. But one of the things, because I only knew Ethiopian coffee pretty much at that time, when I had a lot of questions, especially the conclusive remarks they would make most of the time wouldn't fit my reality in Ethiopia. And they would drop and accept in Ethiopia. So, yeah, that's what it was. And that really triggered a lot of things. And during the time, even when I started coffee, there are few things that I prioritized with my wife starting in 2012. By the way, her name is Sarah, and a lot of people know her a lot more than me. So that was good. And so in 2012, one of the things is, we had this vision up to 2020. And at that time, key priorities was really making sure biotechnology plays a prominent role in coffee. And the primary target was germplasm industry. This was advocacy first, and then adaptation later. Maybe even setting up our own, biotech company to do that. But the environment in Ethiopia wasn't really at that time conducive. It still is not. The second one is coffee tourism. And a big part of this was making coffee education the key entry point for this, and also UNESCO registration as an intangible cultural asset. Okay. And no, we did a lot of advocacy on that. In addition, of course, roast at origin was a big deal for us because Ethiopia at that time was barely exporting 0.1% coffee as a roasted product. So 0%. And we've expanded our vision towards 2043. And it's really realizing an educational institution is the main agenda with 3 primary colleges: ag and environmental science, uh, bio, applied bio and engineering, and leadership and entrepreneurship. This was the 3 colleges or schools that will be within that big educational institution. I'll give you a presentation that I gave one time on that regard sometime down the road. But for now, let's just focus on this. And within this, another thing was in 2016, I found a way to integrate my health work, uh, public health, and coffee. And this was done through, so I started working for an organization called Grounds for Health in the end of 2016, Grounds for Health. And they did cervical cancer prevention in coffee growing communities. So that was a way, like it became a community affair. And there's public health primarily focusing on cervical cancer prevention in coffee growing communities. And then I interact with coffee people, and also most of my coffee enterprises. I don't know, my wife does most of the innovation advisory service that I give her revolved around sustainable business modeling. So really had the environmental side, the economic side, and the social side working. So I'm telling you all this because it plays a critical role in how I kind of started moving away from the nitty gritty details of things and try to become more of a policy person. So I'm a micro person, okay? I'm an implementation person. And because of my systems thinking, I'm also more of a policy big picture person. Uh, and I would like to think I am somewhat of like this. There are times I dwell a lot in the policy or in the macro side of things. There are moments I focus on this, but most of the time I work here trying to find an alignment, uh, for the sake of four things. One is effectiveness, the other one is efficiency, another one is adaptability, and the other one is scalability. Okay, I'll talk about these things, these three especially. These are the basis of taking action. If you could figure out how to be effective and then efficient and then adaptable, then you're good to go. Scalability is a weird concept. You constantly need to reframe it because the scale means different things for different communities. You know, so uh, so I'll talk about this as well down the road. So that was my journey until end of 2025. But through this time, based on that, except in Ethiopia reflection, there are two things I started to do starting then. One is explore coffee consumption in Africa. Because I realized that African coffee consumption cultures were not being utilized for developing the sector, be it in Africa or beyond. Okay, that's one. Or when it is, it's being pitched as something innovative and something that came about somewhere else. So the extraction is a bit asymmetric in that regard. And the second part was, uh, I started working on a book project. It's a book series. And it's actually an 8 volume one. And book one is scheduled to come out this year, 2026. And all the remaining 7 books will likely come by middle of 2028. So book one kind of sets the stage for all the books. So I really need to figure out everything before even publishing book one, which is an odd way to go about it. But I'm not a person who could just sit down, focus on one thing and go at it. So it gave me that privilege of working on different side of things and moving things forward accordingly. So yeah, that's it. And now I'm more of in the implementation and completion phase of things. So I'm working on 4 different things. Okay. One is basically all of them are meant or a part of it. All of them leads towards, okay, what I call sovereign sustainability. Okay. And you could call it sovereign sustainability development, whatever. And one of them is really so. Actually, maybe before that, let me give you a little background how I articulated this. So in Ethiopia during the early 2000s and afterwards, there was the Millennium Development Goals. Okay, the implementing institutions or stakeholders for the Millennium Development Goals, they will tell you the UN and other institutions and NGOs that they've done a lot of good, they've come a long way, they learned a lot, this, that. However, what I look at it is, from a systems perspective is that there wasn't a single country that achieved the Millennium Development Goals. Okay? It was aid dependent, and ultimately, at the end of the day, it did not achieve its set targets. So the failure was much greater than the success. So that was the lesson I learned. Measuring intentions is one thing. Okay? Measuring what happened on the ground is another. The second one is after this, then it was a big hype about SDGs and you know, goals, the Sustainable Development Goals, and they're supposed to be done by 2030. And we've come some ways, but it's still going to be another failure. Again, the intentions are there. A lot of systems developed for people to adapt, to work with. The knowledge base has expanded, but implementation on the ground, not really. Uh, Again, there's a lot of certifications, mechanisms, frameworks, this that developed for all the different MDGs. Uh, but again, a failure because the commitment is not there. If there is a commitment, it's at this lip service level. Uh, so, by the way, one of the things I want you to take away from this is that it's not meant to offend anybody or discredit or take away from the work that a lot of people are doing. Okay. Individual projects might have been successful. Even individual MDGs might have been working for a few countries. They might have come a long way with it. This and that. I take success. Don't worry. That's not like for lack of appreciation. But when you look at it as a system, as a grand objective that the world put together, then it's close to a disaster. It's nothing to show for it at the end of the day. And because now 5 years remains, you will see a lot of people trying to throw money at the problem. And I never thought money is a problem for the world. Rather, we waste it and we don't necessarily use it the most ideal way. So I've been thinking, what's going to be next? I don't want another three-letter acronym that would be thrown at us and not necessarily take us where we want to. And that's how I came up with this sovereign sustainability concept. Okay. And maybe sovereign sustainable development, sovereign sustainability. We could add a third letter if you want, but for me, just sovereign sustainability is fine. Beyond that, whether you want to make it a goal, whether you want to make it some bigger or you want to make it targets, don't care. You make it work for yourself. And that's the framework is what I'm going to be focusing on, along with the different stories and insights that I will have. And the reason is that if these are failing, and if you ask me what was the main reason, is it's because lack of local resource mobilization. Okay. With aid or any kind of support that comes from the external, sovereignty is measured at an individual level or at nation state level. For me, uh, even when a corporation is, practicing the sovereignty, they're doing it based on on behalf of either an individual or a state. You know, this is, I figured, is the key. If you're not a resource that you are generating yourself and making decisions based on your priorities, then your sustainability agenda is not going to be sovereign. And because of that, you're not going to be committed to it. It doesn't mean that external support is not needed or is not going to help. It's going to, but the decision for that sustainability agenda needs to be local, regardless of what level you look at it. You know, uh, as an Ethiopian, someone who resides in Ethiopia, I don't want to believe for one moment that institutions like the United Nations or individual countries somewhere else that are providing donations or aid or anything to Ethiopia do it solely out of the best interest of Ethiopia or out of their true concern for sustainability. I don't. I mean, there might be individuals who do that, but as in institutions and based on lessons learned and all the evidence that are out there, that's not the case. So to bring about ownership when it comes to sustainability, you need to do sovereignty. And sovereignty for me, if you're not generating the resources necessary to do the sustainability work locally, primarily, then it's not going to happen. So that's why we are here. And that's why, if you like this idea, this concept, and want to know more details about it, this is why you should stay. So, ownership, if it requires local resource mobilization. So I figured, and if that is the sovereignty is key to that, I figured, the destination is sovereign sustainability, but how you get there, I called it, sovereign operating system, because it's a system. It's agnostic, it's modular, and I'll tell you a little bit more about it. But this is how it got motivated. So uh, it's for local resource mobilization, and you use this to, once you mobilize the resource in a particular way locally, you use it to do investment in social goods, in research and development, and in strategic ventures. Okay, and this framework can be adaptable to corporations or individuals, and it could be adapted by an administrative community or a nation state. Okay. And the local resource mobilization comes from strategic assets. And we will be using those as inputs. So we call them, I call them champion inputs. Okay. And there's a lot of feedback loops here. And this is pretty much a closed system. And the reason it's designed as a closed system is that it needs to sustain itself. And the ultimate concept is that, in evolution, as far as I'm concerned, there are three layers. One is the natural evolution or the biological one. And then there is a technological one. And then there is a social one. Okay. So it's a bit philosophical, but bear with me. Okay. And for me, the biggest worry I have is not natural evolution or technological evolution. Actually, a big part of this, the sovereign operating system, is how to integrate technology as we move forward. And one of the proof of concepts that I will be doing is doing AI related work with coffee. And I'll talk about that in one of the videos that will come. But social evolution is, I feel like, the missing link. That's what you need for people to actually attain sovereign sustainability. Socially, we have not evolved in a way that actually accommodates and facilitates uh, sovereign sustainability. we socially we've actually evolved in a way that accommodates greed, corruption, mhm, you know, survival of the fittest kind of, you know, adventures. Uh, and That's why you see a lot of violence and the like. So that's me. And that's what I've been doing for the last 30 plus years. And I'm hoping to be able to do this work for the next 3 decades, not just really fully conceptualizing the framework, but also developing a number of proof of concepts that go beyond, uh, you know, Ethiopia and coffee and touch upon a lot of other things. But that's where I'm coming from. And hopefully you'll enjoy this video. And please comment where you're from, if you're seeing this video, and your background, if you have any. I consider myself to be backgroundless because kind of came out the other end in life. Uh, but the things you're interested in, and if you have questions, great. But that's me. And until next video, hopefully I'll be giving you 3 videos a week. Uh, and I think that would be a good pace. If not, it would be two. If it gets really hard, it would be one. But a minimum of 1 video a week. So thank you and have a blessed day.